It is always so beautiful to see the lovely white Easter lilies adorning our churches on Easter Sunday. There is something about their graceful elegance which seems the perfect ornament for the holiest day of the year. Something about their subtle, sweet fragrance which overwhelms our senses with the fresh new life of springtime. Something about their trumpet-like shape which seems to announce in a grand fanfare the long-awaited news that life has triumphed over death. It is difficult to imagine the celebration of Easter without these magnificent white flowers. And yet there was such an Easter. Easter Sunday, 1865, the people of this country went to worship and found that all the joyful white lilies inside the churches had been painted black. The nation was in deepest mourning. The President, Abraham Lincoln, had been shot that Good Friday and died the morning of Holy Saturday. That Easter, April 16th, 1865, is still known as Black Easter. All across the country, the Easter homilies, always about death and new life, were now focused on one particular death, one particular life, and the resurrection of a heartbroken, war-ravaged nation. It was indeed a remarkable coincidence that the man who had so untiringly sacrificed himself to save the nation, to liberate the enslaved, and to extend mercy to all enemies, should see his sacrifice consummated on the very day when the greatest Savior, the most radical liberator, the most merciful brother of humanity accomplished the ultimate sacrifice of the cross. President Lincoln was not a particularly religious man in the conventional sense. Pious, self-righteous people had often been appalled by his off-color humor and his neglect of what they would have considered religious duties. He ignored petitions from stern religious leaders to turn Good Friday into a day of national fasting and mourning, and instead celebrated that solemn day in a sinful theater, enjoying a comedy. His religion was much simpler, much more human, much more of the heart. When I do good, he said, I feel good. When I do bad, I feel bad. That is my religion. Yet his life resonated with the words of the ancient prophet, fulfilled by the Christ and the Christ-like. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the poor, to comfort the broken-hearted, to proclaim liberty to captives and release to those in prison. His inaugural address of 6 weeks before had captured the hearts of the people by laying before them the heart of the gospel, with malice towards none, with charity for all. These simple words of merciful love now became his legacy, his gospel, his undying gift to a people in need of being raised up from the spirit of war and revenge. These words were now repeated everywhere and took on the liberating power of those other simple words of love spoken at the sacrifice of another Good Friday. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. This Easter we remember the Black Easter of so long ago, the sacrifice of a man felled by an assassin's bullet, a man willing to die for the liberation of the enslaved, for the resurrection of a people. This Easter we commemorate the sacrifice of a man nailed to a cross 20 centuries ago, a man willing to die for the liberation of the enslaved, for the resurrection of all people. This Easter, we commemorate the sacrifice of every person of love in every age, of every faith in every land, every person willing to live or to die for the liberation of others, for the life of others, for the love of others. These are the Easter people, and it is for them that the Easter lilies bloom. Perhaps our lives will never be extinguished by an assassin's gun. We may not ever be hung on a tree. But when we live for what we love, we have already embraced the nails. We have already faced the bullet, and we have lived and loved the more. Another prophet of liberation and love, by the name of Martin Luther King, was pierced by a bullet just before the Easter of 1968. He knew it would come someday, but he too went on living and loving, for as he said, a man who won't die for something is not fit to live. He was fit to live. Abraham Lincoln was fit to live. Jesus the Christ was fit to live. They were of the Easter people. Are we? It is for Martin that the Easter lilies bloom. They bloom for Abraham. They bloom for Jesus. They bloom for all who dare to live and live again. They bloom for the crucified, for the gunned down, for the laughed at, the mocked at, the scorned. They bloom for the hated, the downtrodden, the enslaved, the marginalized. They bloom for all for whom love is more powerful than fear. They bloom for all for whom life is more important, more powerful than death. Embrace the living Christ inside of you, that life which cannot die simply because it is willing to die for love. And it is for us that the Easter lilies bloom.